Hi, and welcome to this fourth in a series of studies and reflections on the Psalms. This is part of the program of adult spiritual formation at First Baptist Church, Ann Arbor. My name is Paul Simpson Duke. I'm one of the pastors. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you who are participating in these studies. It will be helpful, as always, if you would have a copy of the psalm we are studying tonight in front of you. It is Psalm 19, a particularly special psalm. C.S. Lewis referred to it as the greatest poem in the Psalter and one of the greatest lyrics in the world. High praise. As I'm about to read it, let me go ahead and point out that there are three rather distinct portions, or I'll be calling them movements, to the psalm as if it were a concerto. The first part is verses 1 through 6 and speak of nature, in particular of the sky and the witness it bears to the glory of God. The second part, verses 7 through 11, concern the law, the instruction of God, and what it gives to us. And then the final movement comes to a point of personal introspection and prayer, asking for help and for guidance. Having laid out that much, let's take a look at and let's listen to Psalm 19. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims God's handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard, yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In the heavens, God has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom from his wedding canopy, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and nothing is hid from its heat. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The decrees of the Lord are sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandments of the Lord is clear, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The ordinances of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter also than honey, and drippings from the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them there is great reward. But who can detect their errors? Clear me from hidden faults. Keep back your servant also from the insolent. Do not let them have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless and innocent of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. The heavens are telling the glory of God. The firmament declares God's handiwork. Our gaze begins by looking upward toward the sky. By the word the heavens is meant the sky in general, but in particular the moon, the sun, all the stars, the clouds, all the colors of sunrise and sunset and rainbow, all that may seem to speak to us. They tell out, says the psalm, the glory of God. Glory, in the Hebrew word for it, refers to heaviness or weight. It also, by extension, refers to grandeur and splendor. The firmament is a word also for sky, although in ancient time it was viewed as having a solid domed surface. It's been called the heavenly vault, on the other side of which was the truly heavenly realm, or where God most fully was. The heavens declare the glory. The sky proclaims the handiwork. It's hard for some of us to hear these words without hearing it as set to music by Haydn in his oratorio, The Creation, the famous song, "The Heavens Are Telling the Glory of God." And I love the fact that in the text he uses, instead of the word handiwork, he has the wonders of his works. This is not the only psalm that has nature giving praise to God. There are several. Look especially at Psalm 148, which urges praise not only from sun and moon and shining stars, but also urges praise from sea monsters and from snow and frost and hail and wild animals and creeping things and flying things and human beings as well. Let them all praise, says the psalm. To return to Psalm 19, the next verse has a really interesting image. It's hard to read so well in the English translation. The one I gave says, "Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge." The picture really is here that day, one day, is speaking to the next day. That as one day comes to an end, it passes along its truth, what it knows, to the new day that is to come. And that the night, as it comes to its conclusion, awaits the next night to tell to that night what it knows to say. What a gorgeous image that is. And the poet adds to this a clarification that really sounds like a riddle. Yes, he has just said, the heavens tell, the skies proclaim, the days and the nights converse, but, verse 3, there is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Yet their voice goes out through all the earth, their words to the end of the world. Nature's witness does not come with words. That's what is said. It doesn't give clearly articulated meaning. This is said 3 times in that verse. No speech, no words, no voice. Nature is a silent witness. Maybe like, as I imagine it, a sort of interpretive dance, or as I would prefer to imagine it, more like music. Music without sung words, instruments, and certainly no narration imposed over it. The heavens make music, and there are no words. Then taking the riddle even further, the poet who has just said there's no voice and no words says, but the voice is heard to the end of the earth, and the words go out to the ends of the world. Good heavens! The word is everywhere, but there are no words. The voice reaches to the end of the world, but there's no voice. That's quite a riddle, and yet we know the sense of it. To me, it suggests, among other things, the ambiguity of nature. The creation, the skies on down, could mean more than one thing. There's a subjectivity to what we think it says or does not say. In ancient times, for example, looking up to the same sky that we do, they could see in the sun that the sun itself was a god. And that when violent storms came, that was a storm god, and that in this particular constellation of stars, there is the figure of a god. And now in our modern times, a conclusion is easily reached that the heavens are saying nothing about anything at all, except about themselves. Why not? We know the science after all. There's no reason for anyone to assume or conclude that the heavens are telling the glory of God, because the heavens, if they're singing, do not offer us words for it. Still many of us, from intuition, from faith, from desire, from conviction, feel in our bones that creation bears witness to glory. It's the stunning beauty of it. It is the mind-boggling complexity and the chaos and the profound order of it nonetheless. It's the science of it, and our sense that it's all shot through with the grandeur of God. We feel this because it moves us so deeply, and it moves us not only to a sense of wonder and thanks and praise, it moves many of us to a longing to be more united with all of it and to be living better lives than we have been living. Why is that? I think the heavens are proclaiming the glory. Being attentive to nature is one way of knowing the glory of God. And though this psalm doesn't sink to the point of being didactic, I will be for just a moment. What's suggested to me here is that it would be a very, very wise and enriching thing if more of us were to give more of our time to enjoying and contemplating the wonders and mysteries of nature. The psalm makes loud and clear that this is one way to experience witness to the glory of God. Now the poem focuses more narrowly from the heavens at large to only the sun. And the image it gives is really amazing. The poem describes sunrise as a bridegroom emerging from the bridal tent. We haven't seen the sun because the sun has been inside the marriage tent and now explodes on the eastern horizon, vigorous and joyous, and begins to run across the entirety of the sky. There's some scholars who read it as changing a bit from that happy bridegroom to a vigorous warrior who is dashing across the battlefield that is the firmament. Hard to say for sure. Regardless, it is a joyous figure who emerges as a newly made groom. In the heavens, God has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom from the wedding canopy, and like a strong man runs his course with joy. What a poetic image that is. An important part of this entire movement is that the witness of nature is totally encompassing. In verse 4, we read in two different ways, the voice and the words are to the ends of the earth, to the ends of the world. And now we see it again. It's rising, its setting is to the ends of the world, and its heat touches everything. That last expression, nothing is hidden from its heat, is important because it will occur, at least be alluded to, near the end of the psalm. That last phrase of the everywhereness of the sun's gift has reminded me of a favorite poem by Mary Oliver. It's called Why I Rise Early, and here's a portion of it. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you maker of the morning, and spread it over the fields and into the windows of even the miserable and the crotchety, and into the faces of the tulips and the nodding morning glories, and into the windows of even the miserable and the crotchety. I believe I've made a mistake in how I cut that. But here's the rest of it. Best preacher that ever was, dear star that just happens to be where you are in the universe, to keep us from ever darkness, to each of us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now how I start the day in happiness, in kindness. Again, if you want to look at that poem, its title is Why I Rise Early. Now suddenly, the second movement of the psalm begins. And it's very different, though, as we'll see, it holds some remarkable similarities as well to movement 1. Poetically speaking, the lines in the Hebrew poem are suddenly shorter, and the cadences of them are slower, statelier, the cadence, the meter of a drum beat. It begins with 6 short sentences in a row, all in the very same structure. There is in each case a noun of something belonging to the Lord. All but one of those nouns is a synonym for the word God's teaching. The synonyms are the Lord's law, the Lord's decrees, the Lord's precepts, the Lord's commandment, the Lord's ordinances. The word fear is also added. These synonyms seem to reflect on how rich is the teaching of God to us, how many colors there are and how many flavors there are, so many different ways of saying it. And then each of those short sentences ends with some verbal expression of what that teaching of God does. These adjectives include, I forgot the adjectives, we'll back up to those. Perfect, right, clear, sure, and true. Then the actions for each of these sentences. That God's instruction revives the soul, makes wise the simple, rejoices the heart, enlightens the eyes, and is righteous altogether. What I'd like you to notice in all those verb parts is that they tend toward expressions filled with delight. Gladdens the heart, enlightens the eyes. And that first adjective, which says perfect, doesn't have the cold sense of infallibility kind of perfection, but of something that is complete and all-encompassing, that encircles us. There's a great deal suggested here about the delight of the teaching of God, which may remind you of Psalm 1, the first psalm of this series, that says, "Blessed is the one whose delight is in the law of the Lord." In the first movement, language about the Holy One was used with the word God, which makes sense as we're talking about the creation. But in this second movement, as we're talking about what the Word, the divine Word, is doing for us, the word God isn't used. The one we know as God is referred to here only as, well, in English, the Lord. But that English word is rendering the Hebrew divine name, Yahweh. The one with whom we are in intimate covenant. That's the one who's teaching to us, whose precepts, whose words, whose law gives light to the eyes, gladness to the heart. Look at what Psalm 19 has done so far. Two pictures, the sky and the scriptures, both revealing God. The sky like music without words, the scriptures words, absent their music. Both are described in terms that are sensual, that communicate delight and joy. They even share a color scheme. The golden sun, the scripture better than fine gold, and honey dripping from the honeycomb. You know what color that is. Speaking of that part, and speaking of sensuous, the poet ends his description of what the law of God gives us by comparing it to gold like much fine gold, and to honey, even honey dripping from the honeycomb. The law is delicious. What a sensuous image. This all sounds a little like the creation story in Genesis. The same order. The creation of the cosmos. Then God giving instruction to the human being. And then the tale of human response to that instruction. The psalmist goes on to add that his own responsiveness positively to this witness of Scripture, this instruction, has greatly rewarded him. He has found in its, quote, warnings, caution and guidance, and how to be careful with his life and his actions. This verse is expressing simply gratitude that life has been lived better than it might otherwise have been. Moreover, by them is your servant warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. And now comes the other big shift, and we arrive at the third movement of this great poem. But who can detect their errors? Clear me from hidden faults. The psalmist is here expressing the problem of how hard it is to comprehend one's own sinfulness, to understand how off-kilter we may have gotten without realizing, how we may not have noticed harm we were doing to ourselves or to others. Who can detect their errors is the question, which is an astute and, I want to say, a very mature question to raise. Our problem is not just what we comprehend about ourselves. It's not just about what we're conscious of. And so the psalmist turns to prayer, which is the main difference between the first two elements and this one. The first two spoke about the divine. But here at the end, we arrive at very personal, even intimate word addressed toward God, prayer. Clear me from hidden faults, or secret faults, or unwitting sins, faults we did not intend or even noticed. You and I can be so clueless, can't we, about ourselves? And these days, many of us have become more aware, especially of how clueless we can be about being complicit in social harms in a way that we were not aware of, not fully. But here, this child of God has a dawning awareness that he's been blind to himself, and he wants all this hidden stuff to be brought into the open and dealt with. Recall how verse 6 said, nothing is hidden from the sun's heat. That image is being indirectly called up here, I think, as the psalmist is thinking of all that's hidden in his or her own life that needs the warmth and the light of the divine to expose what's there and to bring it to new terms, even to the unconscious self. This is not a direct plea for forgiveness as we normally understand it. Clear me. It is a request to be cleared, cleansed, to be delivered from our unconscious, unwitting, secret sins. The psalmist to this adds another word. But before going to that, one other point that I'd like to make. See, please, what the psalm has now done as a whole. We started gazing up at the sky, then descended to reflect on the word in the book, and now have descended further into the hidden places of the heart, the hidden secrets, the hidden desires. This whole psalm is a movement from enthused praise to meditation to intimate prayer. It is a descending of light from God, from the stars, through the scriptures, into the deepest place of the heart. poet goes on to add that whatever isn't right with his life may have roots, could have roots in what is going on in the immediate context, and that in particular, it might be rooted in relationships that are dangerous or destructive. And so is added to the prayer, keep back your servant also from the insolent. Do not let them have dominion over me, that I shall be blameless and innocent of great transgression. That word, the insolent, might be translated the willful or the presumptuous. None of us is an independent inventor of our sins. We absorb attitudes, perceptions, actions of the people who are around us. The prayer is for distance from those who are poisonous to us, that at very least they won't hold, quote, dominion over us. Then I shall be blameless of great transgression. This probably is not, these words blameless of great transgression, probably isn't aiming toward a kind of puritanical perfection of the spiritual and the moral, not that kind of blamelessness. In the context of this psalm, something probably more like being in full harmony with the heavens that declare the glory, and in harmony with the law of God that gives light and life. The great transgression is to know of these things and to choose a way of life, to drift into a way of life that acts as if it were not so. The final verse is one we hear often in church. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight. A poem has spoken of how the skies speak, and then of how the scriptures speak. Now the psalmist looks to his own speech and to the thoughts behind the speech, and prays that they may be found acceptable to God, my rock. That word acceptable is also used in the Bible over and over for sacrifice, which is to say, the words we speak, the thoughts on our mind, our meditation, can be themselves offerings made to God, good or not good. Make my words and my meditations an acceptable sacrifice to you. Let them be offered beneath the sky that's singing and before the open book with the luminous word, my words and thoughts added to theirs. I think C.S. Lewis was right in calling this one of the great lyrics of the world. It takes us to the most important place in the world. That's it for our exploration of this psalm. You will see tomorrow posted on Facebook how you may, or no, this will be in an email to you, how you may connect with a group that wants to explore further the meaning and application of Psalm 19. One meets on Thursday afternoon, the other on Monday evening. There will be a link to help get you to one of those. I conclude these sessions by posing questions for your own reflection to, if you wish, sort of deepen the impact of the scriptures that we have been considering. And today my questions to you are these. The psalm, as we've said, has three movements: the creation declaring God's glory, the scriptures imparting wonderful gifts, and the act of prayer that seeks deliverance from hidden faults. Consider each of these three parts, and of each part ask two questions. One, what's my experience with the truth of this portion of the psalm? And two, what invitation is this portion of the psalm extending to me? Thank you for joining in this study and these reflections. I will hope that we can be joined again next week, next Wednesday. Our exploration for next week is of Psalm 42. Until then, all blessings and goodbye.